This presentation is for Module 1, the Inclusive School Culture. I am Bkuhlman. Some personal demographics. Born and raised in Garden City, Kansas. If you don't know where that's at, it's in western Kansas. I currently live about 20 miles west, which is Lakin. I work for Garden City Public Schools, specifically Garden City High School. Pictured is my boyfriend Ryan. We just bought a house together in Lakin. He works sometimes in Syracuse, which is another about 30 miles west of Lakin, and even sometimes in Hawley, Colorado. So it was kind of our even point. And then we have 3 dogs together. Blair is the rat terrier. She's a little diva dog. Jax is our yellow lab. He is an absolute nutcase. I've recorded this thing probably 6 times and finally just put him outside because he is whining. And then Dag, he is our black lab. He's kind of the golden boy. He is the best behaved dog. Educational background. So I went to the University of Kansas, got my bachelor's degree in athletic training. Following graduation, I accepted a graduate assistantship with the University of Central Missouri. I worked as an athletic trainer for their volleyball and track and field teams, as well as got to complete my master's degree, which was a master's of art in teaching with alternative teaching certificate. So I had to take some undergrad classes as well as all the requirements for my master's degree. So in all, it was about 60 credit hours or so done within 2 years. And then currently I am enrolled for the building principal endorsement, not the full master's degree through Fort Hays State University. Some things about Garden City Public Schools or USD 457 and my job. In 2018, I accepted an 8th grade science position. So I actually teach, and then I'm also an athletic trainer outside of school with the extracurricular activities. So it was kind of cool that I got to be in the middle school I went to. I love the middle school level. I worked some of the middle school sports. But in 2021, I kind of decided I'm over teaching just basic science. I'd really like to teach something more related to the body, things that I'm a little more interested in, and also a sports medicine class. So I transferred to Garden City High School, and now I get to not only teach sports medicine, but then the kids I have in class, if they get hurt during a sport, they actually know what's going on now. So it's really cool. Some things about Garden City High School. This is not the school I went to. This school is only about, I think this fall will be year 10 that has been open. We have approximately 2,100 students. It's only grades 9 through 12. And our school is set up with academies within the school. So we have the freshman academy, which allows them to kind of get used to being in high school. They stay in their little bubble down there. They only come out really for physical education and then like band or if they're in choir. We also have the Public Service Academy. It is for students who are thinking about maybe going into teaching or being a lawyer, anything that is serving the public. I am personally in the Arts and Communication Academy, which I think is kind of crazy since I teach more of a health-related class, but we have culinary, we have design classes, theater, and then the last one is the Trade and Health Academy. So many options for students with wanting to explore those careers. My article summaries. The first one is 7 ways to create an inclusive classroom environment. I personally, when I was making my summary, took the things that I thought were most important. So this one and then the one with the 10 tips. These are just the things that really stood out to me. So academic outcomes and relationships improve with an all-inclusive classroom. Schools need to provide academic support not only to students, but to teachers so that we can provide an inclusive environment. Currently, the curriculum within our schools provide information not relevant to everyday situations, so we need to go back and look at curriculums. And then integrating student bodies and creating a respectful community within the school will foster an inclusive environment. Inclusive leadership in education. To have a vision of change, you must build an effective team and listen to everyone. Inclusion has typically focused on special education, but is moving forward to all types of exclusion. Inclusive leadership welcomes diversity, creates a safe environment, and expects full engagement. In order to have an inclusive school, Leaders need to be all in, show commitment, be aware of a bias, and have an open mindset to empower others. The challenges that arise with inclusion should always reflect back to the vision to make a sustainable change. 10 reasons for inclusive schools. Enable to have inclusion within our schools, we must believe that all students should have equal access to education with their peers. We must be able to focus on the ability the child has rather than their disability. Students engaged with their peers will allow for friendships to develop as well as gaining confidence to interact with others. Our teachers also need to be supported and highly trained to deliver a student-centered curriculum according to each student's ability. Lastly, to have an inclusive school environment, we must value and encourage participation from the community. Developing an inclusive classroom culture. We as a school need to value our students and really build a relationship with them. Educators must really believe in our students and what they can achieve. Each student will bring something to the table when given the opportunity to. Creating an environment that is safe and welcoming to all students will help with dismantling barriers and support learning. But in order to be welcoming to students, staff need to be welcoming to staff. Show that the community is not just in the classroom, but is a school-wide ministry. What is inclusive education and how can you implement it? Students excluded from equal education are not just ones with disability, but also those of different race, gender, income, and language barriers. There are different types of inclusion. Full inclusion is all students belong in the main classroom. Partial inclusion tries to mimic that full inclusion, but has some students separated that require extra supports. Lastly, there is mainstreaming, which is students are in a self-contained classroom until they are ready to be transitioned into a general classroom. Classrooms that are more flexible and provide appropriate support will help with improving the self-confidence of students and give them a sense of belonging. Teachers need more specialized training to help implement inclusion and keep students engaged. All students can't be assessed the same way, so clear feedback and examples are needed. And then lastly, reteaching a subject if it is not understood properly will increase the learning for all students. Roles of principals in successful inclusive schools. The principal is the most critical role within an inclusive school. Leadership should actively participate in order to have success with implementing change. There are many roles that principals must do for successful inclusive schools. I think that two of the most important are assigning special education staff to departments or teams, and then providing that extra planning time for those teams to collaborate and lesson plan together. Clear communication within departments and setting clear expectations will help with accommodating all students. Leaders shall also provide data to their teachers and celebrate their successes on the inclusion within their school. The inclusive school. The purpose of school was not intended to compete, but to be given equal opportunities and to expose different students to different ideas and experiences. Nothing should prevent a student from participating in a school. Schools should make students feel welcome and needed. Changing up the classroom and allowing different options of either seating or grouping when it comes to assignments can help students achieve their learning goals. Teachers should start letting students and even parents be in more control of their education. And schools should try to expand inclusion outside of the classroom, which could include a no-cut policy in sports, or even researching why certain genders or races are not joining a particular club. Leading success. The primary challenge is the preparedness of our students. Like, what are their goals 5 to 10 years from now? Educators need to have challenge conversations so a journey is able to continue for these students. When students' deficits are supported, excuses have been eliminated. It's important to remember that work can be done differently and that everyone does not learn the same way. Allowing work to be done differently can raise each student beyond their own expectations. Be sure to celebrate with your students and your teachers because you are a team. The value of inclusion in education. Inclusion allows students to participate together and feel safe and have a sense of belonging in their environment. Our schools provide students with one of their first relationships outside of their families. Schools that are providing inclusion support see greater outcomes within student achievements. However, the government has to be prepared to invest in inclusion education and give schools the resources they need to be able to give their students an equal education. Creating inclusive schools for all students. Kids need to be an essential member of the classroom. This means no self contained classrooms or pullouts for support. Schools can use the same staff to become inclusive. We're just using them differently. Co teaching with a general education teacher and a special education teacher can ensure that all students' needs are met within that classroom. Modifications to meet the needs of all students will help increase testing scores, not just for the special education students, but for all students. Tips on creating an inclusive school and why it matters. Inclusion is a shared responsibility that requires collaboration among staff members. While collaborating schools can come up with a school-wide expectation instead of allowing the teacher to set them and show and they also have shown fewer absences and behavioral issues. Collecting data on your students is another great tip to make sure that you're not excluding them. Grouping with different ability levels allows students to learn from one another. Teachers within our classrooms can make small adjustments to being more inclusive, such as changing their language from guys to all or everyone. And teachers can also make it a point to get to know their students' families and ask what their preferences are when it comes to either daily contact or what language they prefer. Now we're on to the question. So, how do the resources define inclusive school culture, education, and leadership? Inclusive school culture, all students have equal access to education and learn alongside their same age peers. For education, it is a human right and the key to building more democratic, sustainable, and peaceful societies. And then lastly, leadership will appreciate diversity, invite and welcome everyone with full engagement. Okay, so a leader's role in maintaining an inclusive culture, I think, will go back to collaboration. School leaders should be empowering others and focusing on their team, the staff, to continue their efforts with inclusion. If this culture doesn't exist, it's up to the school leader to show commitment to making the change toward inclusion. They need to understand the flaws in the system and speak up about them. School leaders can have an open mindset and listen to others, not just their staff, without judgment. Support from school leaders to promote advocacy. So, support that a school leader can provide to promote advocacy includes practicing self awareness, showing students and staff that you also make mistakes, building relationships, and creating a sense of belonging to everyone involved in the school, including parents. And then, lastly, helping these people manage the change. Share the responsibility of the changes being made, giving advice or offering strategies to help hardships within that change. Equitable treatment of students and staff. So some steps that can be taken to ensure equitable treatment of students and staff starts off with getting rid of the self-contained rooms or pulling out students for extra support. Use the same staff you already have, just use them differently. Include co-teaching with a special education teacher to ensure that all students are being accommodated for in that classroom. Allow those teachers more planning time to ensure that they are on the same page and that they can lesson plan together and they can talk about the needs of their students. As a school leader, you should also empower the teachers to be a part of the decision-making process when it comes to transitioning to inclusion. Changing the negative assumptions about inclusive cultures. So, steps that a leader can take to help change the negative assumptions that affect teaching and learning, I believe, would start with your vision of inclusion learning. So, not just your staff, but to students and the community, they need to know what your vision is. And this is going to help your staff and others within the community understand your goals towards moving to inclusion. So, just leading by example, being that positive person and including everyone. My concluding thoughts. So, I have a better understanding of promoting the current and future success of well being of each student and adult by applying the knowledge, skills, and commitments necessary to develop and maintain a supportive, equitable, culturally responsive, and inclusive school culture because of the reading and understanding of the articles provided. My leadership skills on inclusive school cultures has improved after completing this assignment. I believe starting this fall, the culture in my own classroom will be different and will not promote not only student success, but also staff success. I believe that what I have summarized will reflect in my classroom and also the staff and students that surround me. and we will all be successful this fall. Relevancy. This assignment was relevant to me because I was able to read and write about exclusion, as well as read about exclusions within the schools that I didn't even really notice to be exclusions. My mindset on exclusion is I mean, I totally support all students having equal education. I've always felt this way, but I don't believe it was projected in my classroom. I feel I've always followed students being pulled, like it was our policy. If they needed to be read to during a exam, they were pulled out for those extra supports. I am going to try and switch things up for this fall so that all my students can stay within my classroom, and provide those extra supports within. My school administration, I believe, supports inclusion by giving us teachers PLC time on Wednesdays, as well as department time when we have our professional development days. They've also included clubs for all students. So, for example, we have the Buffalo Coffee Shop, and it's not even, it's a club, but it's also a class. The club is, the Buffalo Coffee Shop is a life skills class for more of our self-contained students. They learn basic skills of life, but within that thing, they are in the mornings, they're selling coffee, they're learning how to take money from people, and give change back. And they have peer leaders from within the school that also helps these students with a sense of belonging as well as friendship. Um, our special education teacher, he went to our principal and gave them this idea and they ran with it. And now this class makes about $3,000 a week that they use to go back into special education. And it's really awesome. My community being Garden City, Kansas, it's already diverse. Garden City is one of the most ethnically diverse communities in Kansas. I believe there's over 40 languages spoke within the community. And I think they're all for inclusion in education because we already do it. We live with so many different people. We all rally together for community events. I believe that this assignment has had a positive impact on me and my future leadership skills. I believe that after reading these articles, my classroom culture will change this fall to be more inclusive. The information from the articles will not only reflect positively in my classroom, but with the other students and staff members around me, promoting equity for all students. As a future administrator, I believe promoting inclusive culture at a school. I do see some difficulties when it comes to reflecting change. Change is always hard and not always welcomed. It will be an essential. It'll be essential to really demonstrate inclusive school culture and lead by example and show the positives within it, so that way we could all be successful as a district. And there are my references.